So what I'm doing here, I'm just marking out the bolts to get it welded on for the hinge. So I'm basically cutting the cutout for the bolt and welding it on so that you can create a hinge for the folding machine, because it's going to pivot on that hinge so you can fold the metal. So I'm just basically using a angle grinder and cutting it not exactly on the mark, just a bit off from the mark, and so I can adjust it and change the depth of it if I need to by just using the grinder to cut it back. So the bolt size that I'm using there is a 15mm bolt. So I'm just cleaning out the area that I cut. So I'm just getting it ready for prepping, ready for welding. I'm just marking out the other side, doing the same thing as I've done to the other side, making sure that the bolt is exactly on center. You can see me later on measuring it out, make sure it's center. If you're not centered, it's not going to pivot correctly, so just got to make sure 100% pivot and weld it on correctly. So over here I'm just tacking the bolt onto the angle iron and double checking the measurements before I finish it off with the weld. So I'm not the best welder, only welded a few times, but you know, I know the basics of welding. So what I'm doing now is knocking off the slurry of the weld just to make sure it's a nice clean weld, and re-welding over the top of it. The metal that I'm using is 3.5 meters long. It's 60 mils by 60 mils by 3 meters by 6 mils thickness. So I have to get the largest thickness of metal, because there's going to be a lot of pressures on the metal in terms of the amount of force I'll be using to fold these metal. So you want it as thick as you can. So over here I'm just doing the handles for the folding machine. I'm just doing some extra 10mm holes to attach to the folding machine, so I can adjust the height of the folding machine and the handle. So all this is all adjustable, because with the different type of metal you're going to be using, you need to adjust the machine accordingly. So I just use some steel rods and I just got some bolts in that and welded it on. You can see here it's the stiffener that I put in place to stiffen it all up. The handy angle grinder again, cutting it off and then putting the bolts in. So I think it's a 12mm size nuts and bolts system there. So here I'm testing out the handles and making sure that there's no restriction. So over here I'm just giving you a quick image of the hinge system I got in place. I just used the same angle iron there that I cut off and use that as my hinge. I just drilled a hole with the drill press and slotted the bolt in place. So it's already welded up, all good to go now. And now I'm going to start doing the stiffeners on the top plate so that it doesn't flex while I'm using it. The metal's pretty thick, like I mentioned before, but it's just more of insurance policy so that you know, the top plate doesn't flex, because that does majority of the work. So this is a complete system that the folding machine had done. And over here I got the holes for the bolts to go in. So what's holding it The sheet metal down is the bolts on either end, and you just bolt it down, lift it up, and secure the sheet metal with a bolt on either end. I'm using a spray can just to spray all the exposed metal so it doesn't rust. It's a zinc sort of paint that you reuse from in Australia that we use to stop corrosion on the metal. So the folding machine is sitting on a piece of wood, and I just had some legs, table legs lying around, so I put it all together and attach the folding machine on top. I'm just testing out the hinge again, and that's the flat sheet metal that I ordered at the metal shop. It comes in different lengths, so I just got that to the size that I want for the folding machine, and now I'm actually doing the flashing now, measuring it all up and testing out the folding machine on the flashing for the roof. So you see me bolting it down on both ends, and my mate's just putting a wood there just for, you know, any flex in the metal. You do need a bit of power to lift it up, but because it's such a long piece, it's about 2.8 meters long, so you want it, there's a bit of flex in the middle there, but you know, minimal, nothing to worry about. And that's me completed the flashing for the roof. So that's how the flashing turned out. I still got to do a bit of cleaning around where the bit of silicone's left behind, but I did some trimming around there, and I tried to minimize the silicone on the outside, so I didn't like the silicone exposed. But I don't know if you can see, but you can see in there, there's all silicone up in there, so there's no water going to get trapped in there. Even if it does, which I don't think it's gonna, it will have to trickle down there and then go through a metal channel, a U channel that I built, and that's going to trickle down the side and then go down. That's if water doesn't go in. But then you got the house wrap and some angle, sheet metal angle behind it that stops water from coming in, so that is 100% water sealed. Still got to do the trimming on the bottom, but that's fine. I can still do that later on. Just that I ran out of flat sheets to do all my flashing, and I just put some silicone along there. And that's that machine that I built. It's a folding machine. So if you haven't watched all my other videos, have a quick look at that of how to make this, because I use this bad boy to do all my flashings. So all my bottom flashings, window flashings, the top flashing there, I use that to fold it all up. So yeah, so this corrugated sheet that I put on actually sits on an angle that I put on the bottom here. That sits on the bottom. It sort of have a spot where the corrugated sits on it, and then you can silicone there. It's like, you know, no water's going to get in there because I got a Z's flashing up behind that, so that any water that comes in, it just trickles back outside. So you, especially out here where it snows, you want to try to keep any water pooling up and destroying your inside of your cabin. I still got to finish off this window. I got a lot of silicone in there. I'm not too fussed about the silicone work and how it looks. It's more just, you know, making sure it's sealed up, so when I get my next flashing, which I use an example. So this is a flashing that I use. This is an offcut, but that would just sit on the outside of that, and that will give it its look, so you don't really see the silicone anyway. And that's sort of how it looks. Yeah, so these, I completed these two front ones, these front doors. That's how it turned out like, with the flashing and the flashing up the top. Finished these doors as well. I still got to do this bottom one. I ran out of flashing, so I still got to do that bit.
I've done the roof as well. But that folding machine that I got, that's a great machine that I use to fold all these flashings. So yeah, pretty handy tool to have if you haven't got one.